Dr. Dan's Freedom Forum is on the air.
Good evening. This is Dr. Dan, and this is Freedom Forum Live, streamed every Tuesday evening, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Facebook, X, YouTube, and Rumble. The third Tuesday of each month is the Libertarian Perspective. I realize this isn't the third Tuesday, so because we have a special guest on Freedom Forum Live, and it is the Libertarian Perspective. So here goes. This year, 2026, is another national and local election year. Our nation is governed at the federal level and even at the state level by members of two political parties, Republican and Democrat. At least that is the published theory of how government works. Most of us realize, however, that virtually all elected officials belong to one common party, the Uniparty. Regardless of political rhetoric or party affiliation, the primary goal is winning elections and multiple re-elections to satisfy their lust for power and appetite for self-enrichment. That is the truth. The result is a government that works very well for the political ruling class, but is just not functional for solving the needs and problems of the country for the benefit of we the people. Our two-party, uniparty system is so firmly entrenched that their grip on electoral power has not been successfully challenged for over a century. The control of our political system by the Uniparty has been accomplished by legislation and devastating court decisions that allow the influence of wealthy individuals and corporations to purchase electoral victory. If you don't believe that, ask yourself this question. Ask why a candidate for U.S. Senate spends $200 million to get a job that pays $175,000 a year. The answer is, of course, obvious. Money buys favorable decisions on legislation and regulation. There are alternative governing configurations, of course. In the British-style parliamentary system, for example, small political parties can elect enough individuals to influence policy and even become part of the ruling government by coalition. Parliamentary governments are often unstable, as the governing coalition is inherently fragile. When unanticipated issues arise, the solution is not always acceptable to all the coalition members. If the parliamentary majority is not maintained, the government falls. So that's what happens with the parliamentary system. You may be a small political party. You may actually be a member of the majority ruling government, and then something happens. The rest of the coalition says, okay, and you say no, your votes go away, and the government falls. So the most important question we can answer right now is what course of political action is available and potentially successful to preserve our individual freedom. Our constitutional republic is on a runaway train toward financial disaster. Like it or not, we are all passengers on that train. The increasing size and power of our federal legislative and bureaucratic monster in D.C. has seriously continued to erode our natural law rights, abolish and restrict our constitutionally guaranteed freedoms, impede our economic free market rights, and has placed our lives and safety at risk in the approaching national collapse. America is angrily divided. We have lost the ability to disagree without being hateful to each other. We have been purposefully divided into groups. We are no longer one national community dedicated to pursuing the true general welfare of all equally. Since the government cannot give you anything it does not first steal from someone else, benefits given to some must be taken from others. That creates anger and resentment. A nation divided against itself cannot stand. Saul Alinsky and the fascist elite know that. This is Dr. Dan. Want to live together in peace again? There are 3 rules. Live and let live. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And don't hurt anyone, and don't take their stuff. Are Libertarian Party principles the answer? And if so, what actions must the Libertarian Party take to expand its membership and increase its possibility for electoral success? My guest on Freedom Forum Live is Stephen Nikala, the 23rd and current chair of the Libertarian National Committee, where he has served as a board member since 2016. He was a founding member of the Libertarian Party of the Florida Keys and past chair of the Libertarian Party of Florida. As chair, he intends to promote the libertarian concepts for government to increase membership and electoral success of the Libertarian Party. So, Stephen Nikala, welcome as a guest on Freedom Forum Live.
Dr. Dan, thank you so much for having me.
Well, Stephen, I do read your articles and commentary, very well written, very cogent, and I remember Project Archimedes in the 1990s. In fact, as a registered Libertarian Party member, I worked with several state Libertarian parties on ballot access. Before we talk about your Son of Archimedes, which I love that title, what is the current status of the Libertarian Party, like membership, ballot access, electoral success at all levels? Where does the party stand now?
The party is a very interesting place because America is in a very interesting place. Over the past 20 years, we've increased in terms of perception. I believe the term libertarian has become much more of a household name, not just here at home, but internationally. When you have Stephen Miller calling out libertarians by name, those pesky libertarians, when you have more and more young people with very little institutional trust looking for something different and self-identifying as libertarians, there's definitely things to be optimistic for. The Libertarian Party right now stands at about 700,000 registered libertarians in 33 states. That does not include the 27 states without voter registration. So I would estimate we're about 1.2 million registered libertarians, not including those that identify as libertarian in philosophy, but not necessarily registration. Independent is or non-political affiliations, along with third parties, is the largest growing voting bloc in the United States. And it all goes to show that there is fertile soil for the libertarian movement to grow. Now, for membership, we have been at a decline over the last, I would say, 4 to 6 years. There's very different issues for that, various issues that have contributed to that. And my job, stepping into the chairman's role back in February, is to reverse that trend. And one of the ways we were doing that is with going back to our roots, to Project Archimedes, through what we're calling the Parity Project. And in order to facilitate this, I partnered with Perry Willis. He is one of the founding members of he's one of the original architects of Project Archimedes, along with several other folks from back then. Jim Bobka, as well, has been somebody I've been talking to, introduced me to Perry. We were able to fundraise about $44,000 through a max donation. And so far, the Parity Project has raised about, I want to say, close to $80,000. And this is just in the run up to the actual project itself. So we're very excited about that. And the original Archimedes, essentially what it was a marketing campaign for liberty, for the Libertarian Party. It brought us to around $3 million in 2000s dollars, which you can adjust for inflation is quite a bit of money in today's terms. It brought us to our highest number of members, which was about 30,000 at our peak. And these are dues paying members, not necessarily registered voters, but people who give money to the LNC, $25 or more per year. And since then, there hasn't really been a mass marketing campaign or anything like it to try to pull people in. And the foundation of the Parity Project, number one, is to ask a simple question. Would you like to see the Libertarian Party at parity with the Republicans and Democrats within the next 10 years in terms of visibility, electoral success, and strength? If the answer is yes, then we'd like you to sign on and come along for a ride with us as we get to our goals. And how we plan to do that is essentially, this is 2026. We have good data. We know who the libertarians are. We don't need to persuade them. They're already there. They've already told us, I'm a libertarian. And now we need to find them and facilitate them, get them into the organization. And we do that through social media, through text messaging, emails, direct mail, and designing good messages that are going to attract them into the party and keep them up to date as we move along towards the path that we've laid out. And so the Parity Project is our lofty goal to be what we all want the Libertarian Party to be, a powerful third party that can compete against the Republicans and Democrats at the same level within the next 10 years, which is for most of us, that means we'll all be alive and our grandkids will be able to pass the torch at that point as we continue to move forward. But we need to get there before we can really compete at the level we need to. So this is the ambitious goal we've put forward, and I'm very, very excited about it. And I think your viewers would be too.
Well, to me, let me just say that that is a very ambitious goal, and I applaud you for undertaking that, and I hope that you are very successful. But let me tell you a story, because it kind of illustrates for you what the hurdle is, and I know you understand what the hurdle is. I was a member of the Libertarian Party. I was registered Libertarian in the early 2000s, and in 2009. I decided that was what happened in the 17th district here of North Carolina, the House district. The Charles Taylor, who'd been our representative for a long, long time, he'd retired, and the Democrat had won, and he was currently a one-term seat, and he was pretty vulnerable. He hadn't done very much, and he was former football player, actually. And so there was kind of an open seat here. And so I decided that I was going to run for that seat as a libertarian. And because I had friends in the North Carolina Libertarian Party at that point, and I started making rumblings around that I was running for Congress as a libertarian. I was approached by members of the Ron Paul group in Asheville and the Young Republicans in Asheville. And they basically said to me, if you re-register as Republican, we will run your campaign for you. Mm. And that's what I did. I did because as me by myself, I didn't have a whole bunch of experience. And here was a group of people very experienced, very active politically, who said, look, we will do it for you. You just say you just become a Republican. We're going to run your campaign for you. And they did. I was very successful. I was really very successful. As soon as I made it known that I was running in 2009 and early in 2010, I started going to debates and things like that. And the Republican Party the establishment got very worried because I was winning all the debates, and every debate I was in, I would get more votes than the entire other all the candidates in the straw poll. And so there were 4 people plus me. And 2 weeks before filing, they filed in Henderson County a party hack who really didn't know anything. He was just a party hack. And they filed for him, funded him, and he started running. Mm-hmm. And in the primary, I got 35% of the vote in a 6-man primary. Oof. He got 40.2% because they worked very hard for him, the chairman of the Henderson County Party, who, by the way, twice a week would send out nasty emails to thousands of people claiming I was really a libertarian, not a Republican. And which was to a point obviously true, but in many beliefs. But that candidate beat me by 4,000 votes in Henderson County, and I won every other county in the 17th district. But that I was about 81 votes short of forcing a runoff with him. So what we have here is we have a party of principle. The Libertarian Party is the party of principle. You have very strong principles that most of, especially the independents and many Republicans, identify with. How do you get over that hurdle that if you run as a libertarian, you're not going to win? The libertarian candidate takes votes away from a potential winner. And if you are a libertarian, you're not going to win. How do you get over that hurdle?
Well, it's a very good question. And I think one good thing to point out, last year, we won 2/3 of the races that we entered. And libertarians, by and large, typically have fairly positive win rates, which is a surprise to some. And these aren't just dog catcher. This is city council, mayor, county races, police districts. So depending on where libertarians win, and in many of these races, these are nonpartisan elections. So the bread and butter of the Libertarian Party is by and large nonpartisan at the local level. And one of the things the Libertarian National Committee has supported as one of our main priorities is candidate support through what we call Project Decentralized Revolution. And there's nothing more decentralized than being closest to the citizens, which means the local level, because that's where you have the most leverage to change your life and the lives of those around you. If you have a city hall and a mayor that's all libertarian, I mean, my God, you could affect so much change in your own community for the positive. And it just takes getting out there, learning how to run a race, and we have resources and tools to assist those who may be first-time candidates. Maybe they don't have all the funds, maybe they don't have a campaign manager. So we want to facilitate those candidates and also more experienced candidates to either run or rerun for elections. And that is something that I'm very optimistic about, is the Libertarian Party's ability to win locally, because it's much easier to gain ground. You have to build out before you can build up. We're not all going after House and Senate seats in Congress, at least not yet. We have to build a strong foundation. So a part of the Parity Project back in the 2000s, when the messaging inspired a lot of people to come into the party. And back then, libertarianism was a bit of a more of a fringe element in politics. It wasn't something. Nowadays you have Republicans saying, I'm a libertarian, I'm one of you. So it's actually, in many cases, being a libertarian is a positive, or meeting somebody who's libertarian might be the first time they've ever met a libertarian. So you get to paint what the picture of what a libertarian is. You get to be the ambassador for the ideology and for the party. So how do candidates do that? Well, my advice is always this. If you're a candidate for local office, pick 2 or 3 issues that really impact your community and put a libertarian spin on it. I was a candidate for Key West City Council. We have a housing crisis in Key West. So one of my planks was for affordable housing, workforce housing, is accessory dwelling units, is to increase commercial mixed-use laws to allow mixed-use commercial residential in many different areas of the city, as well as other things that impacted the community in terms of tourism, in terms of expenses. These are all things that are extremely prevalent. And so if you're going to run for office, you need to know your people. And if you're involved in the community, you should know your people and you should have a connection with the people you seek to represent. But you want to, of course, as a libertarian, make their lives freer, more prosperous. And you do so by those principles that we all hold near and dear, because those principles guide us in the right direction, whether it's economically, socially, lowering taxes, eliminating regulations, making it easier for businesses, making it easier for residents to live. These are all things that libertarians wish to do, and all good reasons to vote for them. So, so the original question, I think, how do you impact Duvenger's law, which is the law that if in a two-party system, you have two candidates, the Republicans and Democrats, and essentially most people choose between the two. Well, there is some good news, and it's also bad news, quite frankly. The good bad news is institutional trust is at an all-time low, and it's even more so for the younger generations. Every generation, from Gen X, Millennial to now Gen Z, has increased in low institutional trust. So what does that tell us? That tells us in a city like New York, Mamdani, who is a self-admitted socialist, won because he won the majority of the Gen Z vote. That means that in places like Argentina, where institutional trust was decimated thanks to the socialist regime, Javier Milei won because of low institutional trust. They're willing to try something new, and they liked it. And now Javier Milei won a second term, and we're very proud of Argentina in that respect. And so the same thing is true here. Now, it's a double-edged sword, because low institutional trust means the country's not working, things are falling apart. As libertarians, we know this to be the case. Luckily, we have the answer on many of the issues that are inflicting us economically, socially, with our personal freedoms that are all under attack. And so people are willing to go away from the old two parties in the younger generations more now than ever. Now, getting those people to vote, getting those people to come out, that's going to be something for the future, but it's something that is happening. You can rally the people to come out and vote. The older generations, which are phasing out, are really going to be no longer the mainstays of American political politics. The boomers are going to be in the minority over time, which means that you're going to see some major changes in the American political landscape over the next few decades. And they're going to be very radical changes. And there's positives and negatives to this, because on one pole, you have the radical communists, and I mean that in the truest sense of the word. The socialists are communists. Then you have the sort of authoritarian right, and then you have the libertarians, all vying for political capital in this new system. So, give me one moment here. I do apologize. I have to answer the door. My wife just got home, and she doesn't have a key, so I'll be right back.
Very interesting. I'm very glad that that Steve is going into these things, because this is one of the problems that we're running into is, as the voter demographics change, we want to preserve our freedom. We want to preserve what the constitutional republic has given us. It's, if we have departed very far from that, of course, but on the other hand, just because the population changes, there are certain principles in the way we deal with government and the way we deal with each other that I think are still important for us to maintain. So, Stephen, are you back with me?
I am back. I do apologize about that.
Not a problem. The last thing we want to do is leave our wife outside pounding on the door. Is not a good setup.
And the daughter wouldn't be happy either. It's a bad combination.
It's a bad combination. So, what you were talking about is something that's a real concern for for the future. I know a lot of, obviously I see a lot of people, I meet a lot of people, I know a lot of people. I have children who are, I don't know whether they're Gen Z or Gen X or Gen whatever, but they're a lot younger than I am, and they approach life a lot differently than I would have, than certainly than I did, and probably differently than you did as well. So when you take that into account, the question really becomes, what do we do? What do we have? What do we need to preserve? What's important? What is important about America that you think, as a libertarian, needs to be preserved?
That's a great question. I think that the United States is the most successful, richest country in history due to the fact that primarily when the country was founded, it was founded on the principles of freedom. It was founded on the principles that every human being has the ability to self-actualize, and a population that is self-actualized, a population that is that has the prerequisites for freedom, for economic freedom, for the ability. And sorry, my daughter's trying to get her way in here. Is a country that has the ability to actually go out and build a successful system. Freedom and liberty are things that I'm sorry, give me 1 second, Dan. I'm so sorry.
Well, I'm going to have to ad lib again for another second, but this is really the key here, because as the demographics of the country change, and as the demographics of the country change, it's obviously important for us who have a true stake in the country, because we've lived here, we've built our lives, looking to a future that we accept and understand. And so, as the demographics of the country change, what is it that you, as a libertarian and as a representative of the Libertarian Party, what parts of America, what of America is important to you, and the part that you feel the libertarians can best preserve for our country and our future?
I think what libertarians do best is they recognize that the smallest minority is the individual. And when you protect the individual, you don't just see you see the forest for the trees. So there's two schools of thought, which is collectivism versus individualism. And in collectivism and in collectivist countries, they believe that the government is there, the law is there to provide for the greater good of the greater number. So whatever benefits the most amount of people, that's the right thing to do. Even if it hurts some people here or some people there, or even factions or groups of people, as long as it benefits the greater good of the greater number, then that's what we're going to do. In individualist philosophy like libertarianism, we believe in the rights and the sanctity of the individual. So when we talk about minorities, each of us is a different minority. Stephen's different than Dan, who's different than Paul and John and Sally and Sue. And we all have different ways in which we believe we want to live our life to our best capacity. And when you're an adult, you should be able to decide the things, the path in life that makes sense to you, the education that makes sense to you, and have choices that make sense to you, as long as it doesn't impair on the liberty of anybody else around you. So if I'm not doing anything to hurt somebody else, if I'm not being taxed and regulated or told what to do by the state, the more freedom you provide a population, the more prosperity, the more self-actualization I think that can occur. There's a reason why the U.S. has the most patents. There's a reason why the U.S. has enjoyed the standard of living we enjoy, and these things come from that rugged individualism from several hundred years ago. Libertarianism is sort of a mix of European French thinkers and those many, the founding of our country, that is synthesized today as sort of classical liberal view on humanity, and it's not so much of a moral as is a legal philosophy, but I think there are moral elements to it that point to you have this formula. You give people freedom, you decrease the aggression by the state, and from that, the people are going to be the most prosperous. That seems to be the case in just about every area of society. The law is there to safeguard the rights of the individual. The reason we have police in courts and a military is to protect the rights of the individual. So one of the things you asked me, what do we want to kind of conserve? I think the answer would be the institutions of this country that were built on those original ideas of freedom and individual domain and prosperity, because the rightful role of government, if it is fit to exist, is to protect those individual freedoms and rights. Government doesn't grant us rights. The government doesn't say, Dan, you have a right to free speech. You're allowed to have a podcast. No. The point of government is to say, look, you have these inherent freedoms, and the world is a dangerous place, and sometimes individuals aggress against each other. And so the state's job is to preserve and protect those rights and freedoms in order for individuals to carry out the best decisions. It's not up to the state to decide to charter or author, I like to use the term author, what their best vision of society is, or for us, that would be authoritarianism. I think individuals are the best authors of their own life, and we should be able to dictate our own paths. And the libertarian platform lays it out quite clearly, whether it's on economic policy or personal liberty, or so on and so forth. The correct use of force, whether it's foreign policy or domestic policy, under a libertarian lens or framework, preserves the rights of the individual. And I think because we've drifted so far from that ideology, from being able to be okay with the idea that someone may not agree with me, but they may tolerate me and they may tolerate my lifestyle enough to leave me alone, or at least, have the state leave me alone. That philosophy is what made us so rich and prosperous in the first place. And we can see it in so many different areas that's unfortunately beginning to reverse course. So going back to our roots as a country is something the libertarian philosophy is all about.
That to me is exactly what I'd hoped you'd say, because I agree with you at 100%. Live and let it live. That's how I live my life. And I'm blessed to live at a place where everyone else or most other people believe the same thing. I can live my life the way I want. You can live your life the way you want. And we respect each other's rights. And what you're talking about are natural law rights. Natural law rights are rights that come to us by dint of our birth. The government does not give them to us. Rights are not given. The duty of government is to protect and secure those rights. And it says that in the Declaration of Independence, and it certainly is implied in the Constitution, that the Bill of Rights, which to me is that is what this is all about. The Bill of Rights is what you and I are talking about. And that if that is, in fact, which I know it is, the libertarian principles are based on those rights, then I think that you ought to be able to go to people and convince them that libertarianism is the way of the future, not the uniparty with an increasing size of government that is intent on taking away, amending, and abridging and removing every single one of those rights in the Bill of Rights. Look how far we are right now away from those freedoms.
And I think going back to what can we do as the Libertarian Party to be that vehicle, the reality is most people alone, it's very difficult to affect change as an individual. It's possible to affect a lot of change in our own personal gravity, in our families, in our communities. But I think when we combine forces, we build the institutions, whether it's in the media, politics, or the Libertarian Party, business, or whatever it is, we amplify our ability to get things done. So the whole purpose of the Libertarian Party, which has been around for over 50 years, is to give voices to libertarians. And by the way, 50 years ago, the Libertarian Party was what, 5 guys in a living room in Colorado, and it's created an international political movement. We're members of the International Alliance of Libertarian Parties. So there's libertarian parties in Russia, in Argentina, in Venezuela, in the country of Georgia, in the United Kingdom, all around the world with varying levels of success. In Europe, for instance, because they have parliamentary systems, even though they receive minority representation vote, they still get a seat at the national table, and they put in good work. There's Libertarian Party, of course, in Argentina with Javier Milei. There's a renewed Libertarian Party in the United Kingdom. So the libertarian ideology is spreading like wildfire, and I give credit to not only the U.S. Libertarian Party, which has been at the cutting edge for so many years, but when Javier Milei won his election. Throughout Latin America, there's been a surgence in libertarian parties. In Uruguay, for instance, this past year, there's a new Libertarian Party of Uruguay. And so it's exciting to see that the world is embracing this ideology, which has been built on the coattails of very many thinkers, between Murray Rothbard and Ludwig von Mises and Milton Friedman and Frederick Bastiat and others, Ayn Rand and so on and so on. Who've created this beautiful philosophy in terms of its economic prowess, in terms of its view on human freedom, that is so appealing, especially as the world starts to get dark. There's this pinprick of light that I see in a libertarian philosophy, and our hope is that we can rally the people that already agree with us. We can get them to get involved institutionally through their participation, through their finances, through their awareness. And even running for office by any means necessary, to join forces and to expand the Libertarian Party to the point where we've created this upward spiral, and we can speak to the next generation and many generations after that, and plant our flag in the shifting political landscape, which is all possible and all doable. And it's quite interesting. We put out a statement this past Saturday on ICE and the DHS, and the crux of the article, and you can view it on our website. It's also on Twitter or X. We have it posted there. We spoke about the Department of Homeland Security, and we spoke about. I gave a statement on how the DHS started out as a counterterrorism organization. In the wake of 9/11, the DHS was created. They had a counter-terrorist mindset and culture, and this led to ICE being created in civil organizations like the INS that are more administrative, being put under the banner of counterterrorism. And so as things went on, these organizations have received equipment, funding, and resources from the global war on terror. And over the decades, they've expanded, and now they're in our streets. They're basically doing immigration enforcement, although the question of criminality has expanded to nonviolent individuals, visa overstays, green card processing, asylum, et cetera, which traditionally have always been civil issues, have now become criminal with this administration. One day these systems could be used against the regular citizen. They could be used against us. As libertarians, we don't want a technocratic police state, because we know every government emergency power becomes expansive, it becomes permanent, and it moves on to the next emergency. It becomes a feature of governance rather than a temporary power. So it's only a matter of time until these systems grow and grow and grow and are used for more and more circumstances, regardless of anybody's position on immigration, which we, of course, have a position on. But regardless of anyone's position towards immigration, these things are concerning. And the libertarians are all the only ones taking this angle in this conversation. That article received 3 million views in 3 days. So I think there is very much a need for libertarianism and principled libertarianism in the public discourse. And I think Libertarian candidates provide something very well needed, uh, uh, if anything, to move the Overton window closer and closer towards a libertarian society. And we've seen it. We've seen politicians say, "I'm a libertarian, and you should vote for me because I'm one of you." And oftentimes the Republicans will campaign as libertarians but govern like Democrats. And I think Thomas Massey has exposed a lot of that on the congressional level, because so many people that supported MAGA in 2025 with Trump are slowly becoming disillusioned and disappointed, and they're returning to the political home of libertarianism, or they're finding a little political home in libertarianism. So I think as time goes on, as the government continues on the path that it's on, people are going to be looking for something, and we want to be the beacon for those in terms of hope and answers. But in a true way, we're focused on the local level, of course, but we want to expand over the next decade into higher and higher levels of governance, and expand our war chest to be able to facilitate that in our infrastructure as the Libertarian National Committee.
Outreach is obviously going to be very important. You have to be able to reach people. The media is no one trusts the media anymore. That's why we have the internet and the ability to talk to people like you and I are talking to people right now. So that is really where your strength lies. You've come to a place where you do have the ability to reach out to all kinds of people, young people especially, who hang out on social media. And if that is in fact the wave of libertarian future, you're naturally set up. You have the equipment at hand to be able to reach them. I think that's a very, very important thing for the Libertarian Party. I also think that concentrating on local offices first is a very smart thing to do, because that's where you can get the most bang for the smallest amount of bucks and the smallest amount of effort.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also helps train those candidates who may aspire for higher level positions in the future to get the work put in locally before they go on to county or state, which is in the candidate pipeline. So
let me ask you about the Libertarian Party platform. Have you read that recently?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. I read it recently too, to see what things are on there. And it seems to me there are things there that probably should be amended. What do you think?
Well, the party platform has undergone many iterations over the years. It's very short compared to other party platforms. I have read other party platforms. They're usually, 50 to 150, 200 pages long, and they change every couple of years. The party platform, I would say this: libertarians come from many different walks of life, and typically we have our classical liberals, which is pretty much our constitutional conservatives and small government types. You have your minarchists who believe in the smallest form of government possible. Government should run the courts, the police, the military, and that's it. And you have the anarcho-capitalists, usually the Rothbardians, who believe that no matter what size state you have, it'll always metastasize into a larger state. Therefore, everything should be handled by the free market. Javier Milei is actually an anarcho-capitalist, at least ideologically. So we have these three types of libertarians in the party, and not everybody agrees on everything, and not every libertarian agrees with the platform. Maybe they agree with 70, 80% of it. But what I tell people is this: if you agree with most of the platform, I would encourage you to dip your toes in the Libertarian Party, because the way I see it, we're on a 1,000-mile journey, and we're arguing over the last three exits. Are we going to get off on classical liberalism or minarchism or anarchism or some form of constitutional conservatism, whatever the case is? We're very far from that. And I think even our most moderate positions, or even our most liberal positions in terms of the ideology, is such a far cry from mainstream Republican or Democratic ideology that we're all sort of in a similar position in the Overton window. So do I think we should change or amend certain things? That will be up to the delegates at the upcoming 2026 convention in Michigan in May over Memorial Day weekend. And so delegates do have a chance to change things and argue over it and debate and decide what best positions the libertarian ideology for success in 2026 and still maintains what is the principled position of our platform. Once upon a time, it was very even shorter, and then it got a little bit longer, and it kind of accordions, yo-yos in length. Are there some things that I am 100% sold on, or I agree with 99% of the platform myself personally, but I do understand that I don't think anybody, even libertarians, agree with anything. So it is an interesting alliance.
Well, the truth is that you have to expand your membership. You really do. And in order to do that, you have to be able to approach people, and you have to have a libertarian hook to get them to say, yeah, I really should do that. What do you think is the libertarian hook for people unaffiliated and younger people? If you said, what is it that you want to go out and say about libertarianism that will cause these people to say, you're right, I'm in?
I think it would depend somewhat on my audience, but if I had one message, I would say that voting for somebody who doesn't represent you means you've wasted your vote. And libertarianism, in a nutshell, allows you to chart the course of your own life. Nobody knows your life better than you. Nobody in Washington, D.C. or City Hall knows how to live life better than you. So to take power back into your own life, to essentially self-actualize and be free to be who you want to be, the ideology that's going to provide that for you is libertarian. And of course, depending on that person's beliefs, I typically ask questions and route my message around that. But I think ultimately a popular message these days is, how do you get more prosperous? Why does everything cost so much? Why is the value of the dollar going down? Why can't I afford a house? Why can't I have kids? Because I'm afraid to have kids. The world is crazy. Is the world going to end next year? Are we going to go to World War III? All these things, I think, are background anxiety on the next generation. Back 50, 60 years ago, prior to the gold standard being taken off, the number one issue that people had was they were more concerned with their status in their community. Ever since 1971, the number one policy issue has been the economy. And that's because of the Federal Reserve. That's because of our divorce of the gold standard. And when I do messaging, and when I get to really tailor my message to a certain audience, I don't want to bore them with the details per se, because as libertarians, we're right. We're right about, when you take a gold standard and you go to fiat money and you have a Federal Reserve that prints trillions of dollars through a keyboard, adding zeros and pumping all this money into the economy, you're going to have what's called inflation. It's going to devalue your currency. It's going to devalue your savings and your wages and increase asset prices. And there's only one way this ends up, which is either the government's going to default or they're going to get hyperinflation, if you're lucky. Now, the supposition to prevent that is to either balance federal government spending, stop printing money, going back to a gold standard, or decriminalizing other currencies as legal tender, are all ways that can hopefully stop that. But in terms of libertarian messaging, it's always important to meet people where they're at. So for the younger generation, those are the concerns about their future, their careers, where things are headed. And I think libertarianism has a lot of solutions to those problems, because They're all our problems. And we're not lying about it. We're not going to tell you. Back in, I think it was the 1920s, the Democratic platform included something about the Democrats wanted to keep us on the gold standard. In other words, they were saying, give us power and we'll control the money. They had nothing to do with keeping a gold standard or sound money. It was, we want the control. You vote us in, we'll be able to control the money. And that's exactly what they did. And that's exactly what the Republicans did too. So there's really nobody in DC who's interested in these problems, or at least tackling the root of the issue, because of low time preference, or really not understanding principles, or quite frankly, I think when a lot of politicians get into office, they succumb to peer pressure and they toe the party line, whether it's right or wrong, even in ways that don't make any sense in terms of principle, because the old two parties don't have any principle. I'm not saying there's no good people in the Republican or Democratic parties. I know there is. But as far as DC is concerned, I can put on one hand the amount of principled people, even some I don't necessarily agree with, that truly fight for the right thing. Libertarians are a bit of a different breed. We're intellectuals, but we're also fighters. If you look at the personality traits of libertarians, we tend to be very disagreeable. We tend to be very low institutional trust, and for whatever reason, we've all gotten together and created this, support this political ideology, which, maybe you could argue in populations, you have certain people who tend to fit a certain category. But to make a big tent party, you have to meet people where they are. And I don't think the platform's enough. I think the messaging is very important. So my job as chair is to tailor messaging to my audience in a way that I don't compare myself with the Republicans or Democrats. I don't say, well, I agree with the Republicans, they believe in guns. But I also agree with Democrats because they let you smoke weed. We need to find our own narrative, our own voice, and inject it into the conversation, something that's uniquely us. I can sell a cheeseburger, but if I say, well, my cheeseburger is just as good as McDonald's, but my fries are just as good as Burger King, that's not going to sell people. It has to be something different, something better. And so in the same way, when it comes to our messaging and our platform, I think the sales component of it is very important for the chair and for the candidates and for the ambassadors of the philosophy. And for most people, you'll be the first libertarian they've ever met. So how that person acts, how that person behaves, are they likable? Are they very aggressive and in your face, or are they kind? Because sometimes those things matter more than what the person's saying. So we don't want to promise false hope. We're not like the socialists who promise free bus tickets and the government's going to provide food. We believe in reality. We believe in personal responsibility. We believe in economics. But we want to pair that and create a big tent and take yes for an answer and say, if you're interested in what we're saying, if you believe in our shared future, then consider joining the Libertarian Party. And we would welcome you, and we'd like to have you in our big tent, and we'd like to push forward towards a freer and better world together.
Well, a big tent obviously means that you're going to have to bring people in who don't necessarily buy into the entire program. That's what makes it so difficult. As I said in the video in the beginning, this country is angrily divided. That does give the Libertarian Party a niche in the middle to start working at those people who don't want to be angrily divided with everybody. You can't have a conversation of politics around a Thanksgiving table in this era. It is not possible. It's not possible because you have a bunch of people in this country who will not accept truth as the truth, who question truth because they got some different story on the internet. So that is really one of the problems that you face, is that you're going to talk to people and you have to convince them that what you're saying is true and that your goal is to make that truth a reality for them.
And one of our strategies with the Parity Project, or the Son of Archimedes, is once we go after those 1.2 million libertarians that are registered voters and getting them engaged in the Libertarian Party or re-engaged in the Libertarian Party, the next step is discovery. So finding the people that match the same profiles as the people that are at the bottom of our funnel, the ones that have converted into being members and donors and supporters, and going after those people next, because they're out there. Right? There's several studies out there that point to the fact that at least 30% of Americans identify as libertarian. If we can get 30% of the American population activated, the adult population to join the Libertarian Party or to agree with our ideas, now we're in a position of real consequence. So it's a long process to get there, but there is a way to get there.
But when you say 35% of the people identify as libertarians, do you know what portion of libertarianism do they believe in? It's probably not, I believe in the entire bucket.
Precisely.
It's probably some things that they know the Libertarian Party stands for that they will grab onto. Wouldn't you say?
I would say so. And to tell you the truth, I think most Americans are at some degree really apolitical. And what I mean by that is I don't think everybody has really sat down and considered where they stand on all things politically. They probably don't agree necessarily entirely with any party, or at least on its face. I don't think that people really, they're not so much swayed by arguments and ideas as they are by emotions in some cases. So all these things taken into consideration, but I still think they can be persuaded. And I think finding people where they are, tailoring the message, getting them to agree with you on key issues. They don't have to agree on everything, but they can still support you. They can still vote for you. And the hardcore ones, the ones that are the true believers, are the ones that, will run for office, the ones that'll carry the flag, et cetera, et cetera. But not everybody has to be so zealous. Most Americans, I think, or look for a change. If you look at Argentina, for instance, I don't think everyone in Argentina suddenly started reading Rothbard and Mises and Bastiat. I think they saw a man, Javier Milei, who told them something that resonated with them. Whether they intellectually agreed or not, they felt it because someone was articulating something they felt for so many years, that the corrupt politicians, the people in power, they're all in it for themselves, and you're the sucker. And if you vote for me, we're going to slash everything, afuera to this, afuera to that. We're going to, all these government employees that don't go to work, they're getting kicked to the curb. They have to find something useful to do. And we know things are bad. No hay plata. There's no money. Things are going to get worse before it gets better. And all the things he said were true. And people voted for him a second time. And I think I was just talking to Yvonne Du Bois. He's the chairman of the International Alliance of Libertarian Parties. He's in the Liberty Advances Party. He told me that inflation went from about 250% per year in Argentina to about 22%, 25%, somewhere around there. So they had a tenfold decrease in inflation. They won their second term overwhelmingly. And if libertarianism can do that for a country that went from importing the most F-150s in the 80s and 90s to being one of the poorest in Latin America, to now, again, on the rise to its former glory after what they went through socialism. If libertarianism can do that in Argentina, then I can only imagine what it can do for the rest of the country. And I think people need to be shown and they need to buy in to this idea of libertarianism. They may not agree with everything. Then people of Argentina may not agree with Javier Milei on everything. But if we're good stewards of the party, of the message, and we govern well by governing least, then I think that there is an optimistic future for libertarianism to carve out its way in the United States and around the world, because there's other libertarian parties that are gaining steam. And I think this is a global movement, a global libertarian movement that is spreading fire.
You've just verbalized for me what I think is in the top of everyone's minds, that our government now is made up basically of people who are only interested in lining their own pockets. They will vote for anything that puts money in their pocket and takes it away from us. I think you would get huge buy-in on that particular theme. One of the problems, though, is that the uniparty over the last 50 years or so has been very, very successful in building a society in which large segments are dependent
Mhm.
upon the government. That is a huge problem. I don't personally like working 5 months a year to support people that I don't know. I work very hard, and I think I should have more of I should be able to enjoy the fruits of my labor better than having to pay for a lot other people. So that is something that is very hard to fix, because once you reach the amount of dependency that we have in our country, changing that is going to be painful and also difficult. So what is your approach on something like that?
Well, when you downsize the welfare state, there's going to be it's a difficult process, because those that have become to rely on it, um, for many of them, in my opinion, when you have soldiers relying on the VA, or retirees that maybe have pensions or things like that, it's two questions. And I think libertarians largely believe if you were promised something, and you work for it, if you're a firefighter, for instance, and you have a pension, well, perhaps we have to support, whatever programs or things that the federal government or whatever is doing to that these people deserve. I'll give an instance, VA or so on and so forth. But when it comes to the vast majority of Social Security spending, when it comes to the vast majority of welfare, it's mathematically unsustainable. It literally cannot be sustained. So one way or another, it's going to have to stop. Either Social Security is going to run out because there's not enough young people; they don't exist to support the aging boomer generation as they retire. Mathematically, it's impossible. The unfunded liabilities in this country are something like $150 trillion. We can't print well, if we could print our way out of that, but it won't be pretty. So something's got to change. Something's got to
Please
give.
no.
And so libertarians have always supported private sector programs. People, of course, can fund their own 401ks. The younger generation doesn't have to take money out of their paycheck to supposedly fund their future. The whole thing is a Ponzi scheme. No benefits or Social Security or any welfare should be given to people who are able-bodied, who can work, people who are not citizens of this country. Immigration contains perverse incentives, such as welfare benefits. That's why in places like Western Europe, they have such a crisis, because they're encouraging people to pretend to be refugees, whether they are or not, come in and not work. Well, my great-great-great-grandfather was Irish. He came in the turn of the 20th century. He immigrated. He had to work. My grandfather on my mother's side is Japanese. He worked. He eventually went to a Japanese internment camp, went back to Japan after World War II. My father immigrated from Cairo, Egypt. Long line of immigrants in my family, worked and built businesses here in the States with a single mother and a brother. So throughout the great majority of American history, we said if you come to the United States, you work. And as a matter of fact, there used to be what's called mutual aid societies that were very popular up until Social Security was invented. Because in a mutual aid society, back in the day, community was built around the idea that if somebody needed help, you would help them. And then tomorrow, if somebody else needed help, the person who was helped would help the other person. These were mutual aid societies based on ethnic and racial lines, as well as community lines. Back then, the church was a part of the community as well. All these organizations helped each other. There was even Black-owned hospitals that benefited the Black community. What happened? Well, the American, I think it was the either the American Medical Association lobbied Congress to pass various regulations, which got rid of those hospitals because they were competing with their hospitals. Social Security essentially ended the mutual aid societies as a facet of community life and a social safety net, depersonalizing welfare, essentially making it something the state does. And so the left says, well, if you don't pay your taxes, or if I don't vote to increase the amount of money you have to put into welfare, then you're not a kind human being. But the government's taking that money from you by force. If you don't pay your taxes, you're going to go to jail. So who's really compassionate here? If I force somebody to pay somebody else's bill by gunpoint, is that compassion? Or is that just a depersonalized, misused collectivist approach to governance? And libertarians believe it's the latter. And so when we talk about things like welfare and privatizing welfare, the big critique is, well, you libertarians are heartless. You only want what's good for you. You don't want to. That's not true. We believe we want universal health care. We want everybody to get the help they need. We just think it should come from the private sector. We don't think it should come from government. And so the government has slowly eroded these things. Frederick Bastiat has a famous quote that I always like. He says that the socialists will say that if the government provided food and we said they shouldn't, that we don't want people to eat. So, if the government was the one that provided all of our groceries and we got taxed 30% for our groceries, and libertarians said, well, you should be able to go to a grocery store, they'd say, what, you don't want people to starve? Or you don't want people to be educated? So on and so forth. So bringing things back to the private sector not only respects our personal liberties because we're not being coerced into paying for these services. My daughter goes to private school. I went to public school growing up. It was okay. It wasn't the best quality education by any means. And I think the quality of private education is far superior to public education. So how do you make private education accessible to people on a public education budget? Well, the reality is everybody is paying for public education, whether they realize it or not, because whether you own a home or you rent, your rent is going towards property taxes, which goes towards education. So in essence, not only are you paying for education from the time you have children, but also the time you don't have kids. And, free markets make things cheaper. If everybody was going to private schools, there would be very inexpensive options with varying degrees of tiers and scholarships and so on and so forth to make education accessible. I guarantee in a country as rich as the United States, and even countries not, private education would be superior to public education and less expensive and of better quality. All of our kids are failing in public schools and we wonder why. So we give the Department of Education another 20, 30, $100 billion, whatever it is, and then they dump it in and it goes nowhere. It doesn't improve grades or anything. So libertarians want a better world. We want a better society. We're not just in it for ourselves because, we're not misanthropes who hate humanity. We generally want a better civilization society for our compatriots.
Well, very, very easily to sum up what you just said, if a service can be provided by the private sector, the government does not belong providing it.
Yes.
That's very simple. And another simple thing is when it comes to natural law rights, if someone claims that they have a right to something, your first question, as Ayn Rand said, your first question should be at whose expense? And that really kind of sums up libertarianism to me, is that the free market should provide everything that the free market does, and the government should not be in competition with the free market. And anything you claim as a right that I have to pay for is not a right. It's theft by the government.
The only role of government should be to protect life, liberty, and property. Beyond that, leave it to the private sector.
I agree 100%. So what would you like to say in summary of what you want to do, what you want to achieve with the Libertarian Party? starting with this year of your leadership?
I would summarize it as a membership and fundraising centric approach. I think those are the two most important things we need to focus on to grow the Libertarian Party, followed by candidates and single issue coalitions. And those are all somewhat intertwined. Through the Parity Project, Project Archimedes 2.0, we are launching our most ambitious mission ever to recruit and engage registered libertarians in the United States, of which there's between 700,000 that we know of and an estimated 1.2 million total. From there, we rally, we build, we grow, and within 10 years, I'd like to see the Libertarian Party at parity with the Republicans and Democrats in terms of money, electoral success, and our presence in the media and among Americans. And I would encourage folks to check out the Libertarian platform. If you agree with 70 or 80% of it, if you agree that the Republicans and Democrats don't serve you and you want something different, you support our mission for liberty, head over to lp.org, make the pledge. It's $25 for membership. You don't have to change your voter registration if you don't want to. Of course, we always appreciate it if you do, but we appreciate your support in the mission. Sign up for our newsletter. It's free. You can follow us on social media, X, Facebook. I'm on X, Stephen Akela. You can follow me there. And I'd encourage folks to keep up with our work. Find your local state party, your local chapter. Come to a meeting. See if you like it. Meet the folks in your area who are libertarian. You could always look into libertarian philosophical thinkers to gain a very interesting perspective on politics that is rising all around the world. And I encourage your viewers to keep up to what we're doing. And of course, you can reach out to me at chair@lp.org if anybody has any questions from your show. And once again, Dana, thank you so much for having me on. And I may see you in the North Carolina convention. So I'll let you know if I make it out.
Right. The North Carolina convention is at Lake Lure, and that's the last weekend in March this year. It's the 50th anniversary of the Libertarian Party of North Carolina. I'm going to be one of the speakers, and I hope to see you there as well. And I want to thank you very, very much for a very enlightening discussion tonight on Dr. Dan's Freedom Forum Live. Thank you, Stephen Akela. It's been great.
Thank you so much, Dan.